The thick, black mud squelched between Harper Blackwood's fingers as Madison Sterling forced her face toward the ground behind the gymnasium. Rain had turned the earth into a disgusting soup of dirt, dead leaves, and something that smelled like rotting garbage. Madison's perfectly manicured nails dug into Harper's scalp, her designer sneakers finding purchase on Harper's back. "Open your mouth, freak," Madison hissed, her voice carrying that special kind of cruelty that only came from years of practice. "Time for your lunch." Harper's chemistry notebook lay scattered beside them, pages of carefully written molecular formulas now soaking in the same filth. Madison wanted to force down her throat. The irony wasn't lost on her. Those equations represented power that Madison couldn't even begin to comprehend, but right now, with 3 other girls holding her arms and legs, Harper felt anything but powerful. "Please," Harper whispered, dirt already coating her lips. "I didn't do anything to you." Madison's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Exactly. You exist. That's enough." What Madison didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the quiet girl they'd been tormenting for months had been spending her afternoons in the advanced chemistry lab, and the things she'd learned there were about to change everything. But that revelation was still hours away. Before we dive into Harper's incredible journey, I just want to say how much these stories mean to me, and hopefully to you too. If this story resonates with you, maybe you've been in Harper's shoes, or you know someone who has, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Your engagement helps these stories reach the people who need to hear them most. And if you're feeling generous and want to support more inspiring content like this, there's a little thanks button below the video. Every bit of support, no matter how small, helps me bring you more stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things when they refuse to give up. These stories matter because somewhere out there, someone needs to know they're not alone in their struggle. 3 months earlier, Harper had started her junior year at Willowbrook High with one simple goal: survive until graduation. She kept her head down, sat in the back of every classroom, and spoke only when directly asked a question. Her mother worked double shifts at the local hospital, and her father had been gone since she was 7. The scholarship that kept her in advanced placement classes was the only thing standing between her and a future of minimum-wage jobs. Harper had always been different. While other kids played video games or scrolled through social media, she devoured chemistry textbooks like they were adventure novels. She understood molecular bonds the way other people understood song lyrics. When she looked at the periodic table, she saw patterns and possibilities that made her heart race with excitement. Madison Sterling represented everything Harper wasn't and could never be. Blonde hair that caught sunlight like spun gold, a wardrobe that cost more than most people's cars, and the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about anything more serious than which college would be lucky enough to accept her father's donation. Madison's family owned Sterling Industries, the chemical plant that employed half the town. She was homecoming queen, student council president, and captain of the debate team. She was also a sociopath who enjoyed destroying people for entertainment. The first attack had come during lunch in October. Harper was sitting alone in the cafeteria, reviewing her notes for advanced placement chemistry, when Madison appeared with her 3 closest followers. Savannah Cross had red hair and a smile that never reached her eyes. Sierra Morrison was tall and athletic, with the kind of muscle that came from years of competitive swimming. Brooklyn Hayes rounded out the group, quiet but vicious, always ready to follow Madison's lead. "Oh my God," Madison had said, loud enough for half the cafeteria to hear. "Harper, right? I heard you got a perfect score on the chemistry midterm." Harper looked up, surprised. Madison had never spoken to her before. "Yes? That's so amazing," Madison continued, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I mean, considering your circumstances, it's really impressive that you can keep up with students who've had every advantage." The words hit like a slap. Harper felt her cheeks burn red as conversations stopped at nearby tables. "I just study hard." "Of course you do," Savannah chimed in. "I'm sure it has nothing to do with the extra help you get from Mr. Peterson during those private tutoring sessions after school." The implication was clear and completely false. Harper had never received any special assistance beyond what was available to all students. But Madison's audience didn't need facts, just insinuation. "Some people work for their grades," Harper said quietly, gathering her things. "And some people work the system," Sierra added with a cruel grin. Harper left the cafeteria with her appetite gone, and her reputation already beginning to crumble. That was when she realized Madison Sterling wasn't just mean, she was strategic. Over the following weeks, the psychological warfare intensified. Harper's locker was vandalized with words like cheater and fraud written in permanent marker. Her chemistry textbooks disappeared from her bag, only to reappear days later with key pages torn out. Anonymous notes appeared questioning her academic integrity, written on expensive stationery that reeked of designer perfume. But the worst part was watching teachers begin to doubt her. Mr. Peterson, who had once praised her exceptional understanding of organic chemistry, started watching her suspiciously during tests. Mrs. Williams stopped calling on her in class. The guidance counselor suggested that perhaps she was taking on too much academic pressure. Madison's poison was spreading through the faculty, administered through carefully placed phone calls and concerned conversations from influential parents. The Sterling family donated thousands of dollars to the school every year. Their voice carried weight that Harper's mother's double shifts at the hospital never could. Harper found refuge in the chemistry lab after school. When the hallways emptied and the building grew quiet, she would slip into the advanced lab and lose herself in experiments. The smell of sulfur and iodine became her sanctuary. Beakers and Bunsen burners were her closest friends. It was there, during one particularly brutal week in November, that she made a discovery that would change everything. She had been working on an extra credit project, synthesizing compounds for Mr. Peterson's advanced class, when she accidentally mixed the wrong proportions of potassium permanganate and glycerin. The reaction was immediate and violent, producing a small but impressive explosion that left her ears ringing and her heart pounding. Instead of being terrified, Harper felt exhilarated. She spent the next 2 hours researching the chemical reaction, understanding exactly what had happened and why. By the time she left the lab that evening, she had filled 6 pages with notes about explosive compounds and their applications. The seed of an idea had been planted. Madison's campaign reached a new level of cruelty in December. During chemistry class, she stood up during a particularly complex lesson about catalytic reactions and loudly asked Mr. Peterson if he thought some students might be using unauthorized assistance to understand concepts beyond their natural capabilities. Madison continued, her eyes locked on Harper. Some of these reactions are really advanced. It's impressive that everyone can keep up. The entire class turned to stare at Harper, who felt her face burn with humiliation. Mr. Peterson looked uncomfortable but didn't defend her. That silence spoke volumes. After class, Madison cornered Harper in the hallway. Her 3 followers formed a barrier, blocking potential witnesses. "You know what I think?" Madison said, stepping close enough that Harper could smell her expensive perfume. "I think you're a fraud. I think you've been cheating your way through advanced classes, taking spots away from students who actually deserve them." "That's not true," Harper whispered. "Prove it," Savannah challenged. "Take a test right now. With no books, no notes, no help. Let's see how smart you really are." "I don't have to prove anything to you." "Actually, you do," Sierra said, her voice carrying the threat of violence. "Because if you don't, we'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are." Brooklyn finally spoke, her voice quiet but venomous. "Cheaters don't belong here. Liars don't deserve scholarships." Harper walked away without another word, but she could feel their eyes burning into her back. That afternoon, she stayed in the chemistry lab until nearly 8 o'clock, working on compounds that required increasingly dangerous combinations of chemicals. The idea that had been growing in her mind was beginning to take shape. December 21st was the last day of school before winter break. Harper thought she might have 2 weeks of peace, time to recover from months of psychological torture. and plan her strategy for the new semester. She was wrong. Madison had planned something special for the occasion. Harper was walking toward the parking lot after staying late to clean the chemistry lab when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to see Madison, Savannah, Sierra, and Brooklyn approaching with the purposeful stride of predators who had finally cornered their prey. "Going somewhere?" Madison asked, her smile predatory. "Home," Harper said simply. "Not yet," Savannah said, producing a smartphone and activating the camera. "We have something special planned for you." They surrounded her in the empty parking lot. Far from any potential witnesses or security cameras, the winter sun was setting early, casting long shadows that seemed to swallow the light. "Here's what's going to happen," Madison announced with the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. "You're going to confess on camera that you've been cheating your way through advanced classes. You're going to admit that you don't belong here, and that you've been taking opportunities away from more deserving students." "And if I don't?" Harper asked, though she already knew the answer. "Then we'll make the confession for you," Sierra said, cracking her knuckles. "After we teach you some manners." Brooklyn grabbed Harper's backpack and dumped its contents onto the wet pavement: chemistry textbooks, carefully organized notes, and lab equipment scattered across the asphalt. "Look at all this stuff," she said mockingly. "Must be nice to have so much extra help." "Those are my notes," Harper said, watching months of work scattered like garbage. "Your cheat sheets." "You mean," Madison corrected. She picked up Harper's chemistry notebook, the one filled with her own original research and experimental findings. Without hesitation, she tore out page after page, letting them flutter to the ground like confetti. "Stop!" Harper pleaded, reaching for her destroyed work. Savannah shoved her backward. "We're just getting started." That's when Madison produced a plastic bottle filled with thick, black mud she had collected from behind the gymnasium. "You know what I think?" she said, unscrewing the cap. "I think you need to learn some humility. I think you need to understand what you really are." Harper's blood ran cold as she realized what they intended to do. "You're going to get on your knees," Madison continued, her voice carrying the satisfaction of someone who had planned every detail. "You're going to open your mouth, and you're going to eat this mud while apologizing for lying about your abilities and stealing opportunities from honest students, and we're going to film every second of it," Savannah added, holding up her phone. "Your confession is going viral. Every college you've applied to will see exactly what kind of person you really are." Harper looked at each of them in turn. These girls who had decided that her existence was somehow a threat to their perfect world. They had money, connections, and the kind of social power that could destroy her future with a single video, but they didn't know about the notebook hidden in her jacket pocket. They didn't know about the experiments she had been conducting or the formulas she had memorized. They didn't know that the quiet girl they had been tormenting for months had been preparing for exactly this moment. "No," Harper said quietly. "Excuse me?" Madison's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose in surprise. "I said no." Harper's voice was stronger now, carrying a note of something none of them had heard before. "I'm not doing any of that." Madison's face twisted with rage. "You don't get to say no to me. You're nobody. Your mother is nobody. Your whole pathetic family is nobody." "Maybe," Harper agreed. "But you know what I am? I'm the only person in this school who understands chemical reactions well enough to synthesize compounds that could level this building." The words hung in the air like a challenge. For the first time since Harper had known her, Madison looked uncertain. "You're bluffing," Savannah said, but her voice lacked conviction. Harper reached into her jacket and pulled out a small glass vial filled with clear liquid. Nitroglycerin is surprisingly easy to make when you have access to nitric acid, sulfuric acid, and glycerin. All standard chemistry lab supplies. Sierra took a step backward. "You're crazy." "No," Harper said calmly. I'm tired. I'm tired of being pushed around by people who think they're better than me because of their last names and bank accounts. I'm tired of pretending to be weak when I have knowledge that could destroy everything you care about." Brooklyn's phone trembled in her hands. "She's lying. She's just trying to scare us." Harper unscrewed the cap of the vial, and the sharp, sweet smell of nitroglycerin, filled the air. Anyone who had taken advanced chemistry would recognize that distinctive odor immediately. The beautiful thing about nitroglycerin, Harper continued conversationally, is that it's incredibly unstable. The slightest shock, the smallest vibration, and she mimed an explosion with her free hand. Madison's face had gone pale beneath her perfect makeup. You wouldn't dare. You spent months trying to destroy my life. Harper said, you turned teachers against me, spread lies about my integrity, and tried to steal my future. Now you want me to eat mud while you film it for entertainment. She held the vial higher, and all four girls took another step back. Here's what's actually going to happen, Harper announced, her voice carrying an authority none of them had ever heard before. You're going to delete any recordings you've made. You're going to stop harassing me and every other student you've been targeting. You're going to publicly apologize for the lies you've spread about my academic integrity. And if we don't? Madison asked. Though her voice lacked its usual confidence, Harper smiled. And for the first time in months, it was genuine. Then you'll discover exactly how much damage one dedicated chemistry student can do when she stops caring about consequences. The standoff lasted for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Finally, Madison gestured to her followers. Delete the videos, she said quietly. But Madison, Savannah started to protest. Delete them, Madison snapped. One by one. Harper watched them erase their recordings. Brooklyn picked up Harper's scattered notebooks and textbooks, handling them like precious artifacts. Sierra helped gather the loose papers, careful not to damage them further. When everything was returned to Harper's backpack, Madison stepped forward one final time. This isn't over, she said. But the words lacked conviction. Yes, it is, Harper replied, carefully capping the vial and returning it to her jacket. Because now you know what I'm capable of. And this was just a demonstration. As Madison and her followers walked away, Harper allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The months of psychological warfare were finally over. The bullies who had made her life miserable now understood that their target was far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. But as she watched them disappear into the gathering darkness, Harper realized that her real revenge was just beginning. The formulas she had memorized, the compounds she could synthesize, the explosive potential she had discovered, all of it was still available to her. Madison Sterling and her followers thought this confrontation was the end of their conflict. They had no idea. It was only the beginning. Harper walked toward her mother's old car, her mind already racing with possibilities. The chemistry lab would be empty over winter break. She would have 2 weeks of uninterrupted access to equipment and supplies, 2 weeks to prepare something that would make nitroglycerin look like a child's toy. By the time classes resumed in January, Harper Blackwood would no longer be the quiet victim everyone could push around. She would be something far more dangerous, a chemistry genius, with nothing left to lose and the knowledge to back up any threat she chose to make. The real explosive revenge was about to begin. As she drove home through the empty streets, Harper's reflection in the rearview mirror showed a different person than the one who had walked into school that morning. The scared, desperate girl was gone, replaced by someone who understood the true power of knowledge and wasn't afraid to use it. Madison Sterling had made the mistake of backing a chemistry genius into a corner. Now she was about to learn what happened when someone with advanced knowledge of explosive compounds decided to fight back. The winter break was going to be very educational for everyone involved. But Harper's plans went far beyond simple revenge. What she had in mind would not only settle the score with Madison and her followers, but would also send a message to every bully in the school about what happened when they picked the wrong target. The quiet chemistry student was about to become the most dangerous person at Willowbrook High School, and Madison Sterling was going to be the first to discover exactly what that meant. Harper's hands shook as she unlocked her mother's car, the vial of nitroglycerin still warm in her jacket pocket. The confrontation with Madison had been months in the making, but seeing the fear in those perfectly made-up eyes had been worth every sleepless night spent perfecting volatile compounds in the chemistry lab. The drive home took 15 minutes through Willowbrook's quiet suburban streets, lined with houses that cost more than her mother would earn in 10 years. Harper had memorized every address during her scholarship interview process, studying the neighborhoods where her classmates lived like a military strategist mapping enemy territory. Madison's house sat on Maple Ridge Drive, a sprawling colonial with a circular driveway and enough square footage to house 3 families. Harper had driven past it dozens of times, watching the Sterling family's perfect life through floor-to-ceiling windows, Mercedes vehicles in the driveway, manicured lawns maintained by professional services, and party lights strung up for gatherings Harper would never be invited to attend. Tonight, those lights seemed different, less welcoming, more like a target. Harper pulled into the cramped parking space behind her apartment complex, a 3-story brick building that housed mostly hospital workers and service employees. The contrast between her world and Madison's had never felt sharper, but for the first time in months, Harper didn't feel ashamed of the difference. She felt empowered by it. Her mother wouldn't be home until after midnight, pulling another double shift to pay for Harper's school supplies and college application fees. Sarah Blackwood had sacrificed everything to give her daughter opportunities she'd never had, working herself to exhaustion so Harper could attend advanced classes with kids whose parents bought them new cars for their 16th birthdays. Harper climbed the narrow stairs to their second-floor apartment, her backpack heavy with rescued textbooks and the notebook Madison had tried to destroy. Each torn page represented hours of original research, the chemical formulas she'd developed through trial and error in the lab after school. Inside their small kitchen, Harper spread her damaged notes across the scarred wooden table her mother had bought second-hand 5 years ago. Under the harsh fluorescent light, she could see exactly how much work would need to be reconstructed. Madison's cruelty had been thorough, systematic, designed to cause maximum psychological damage. But Madison had made one crucial miscalculation. She had assumed that destroying Harper's written work would cripple her academic progress. What she didn't understand was that Harper had memorized every formula, every reaction, every molecular structure. The notebooks were convenience, not necessity. Harper opened her laptop, a refurbished model her mother had found at a discount electronics store, and began reconstructing her research from memory. The chemical equations flowed from her fingertips like poetry, each symbol representing power that Madison couldn't comprehend. Potassium permanganate plus glycerin created flash explosions. Aluminum powder mixed with iron oxide produced thermite capable of melting through steel. Ammonium nitrate combined with diesel fuel yielded compounds used in mining operations, and, occasionally, less legitimate applications. As Harper typed, her plans began crystallizing. Madison Sterling thought she had won tonight's confrontation, that Harper's threat had been an empty bluff designed to escape immediate humiliation. She had no idea that the nitroglycerin demonstration was merely an introduction to capabilities far more extensive and dangerous. The Sterling family's chemical plant provided the perfect target for Harper's developing strategy. Sterling Industries manufactured fertilizers, industrial solvents, and cleaning compounds. Their warehouse contained enough raw materials to supply a small army of chemistry students with everything needed for advanced explosive research. More importantly, the plant's security was designed to keep people out, not to prevent someone with legitimate access from removing materials. Harper's scholarship included a summer internship program at local businesses. She had been planning to apply for a position at Sterling Industries next year, hoping to gain practical experience in industrial chemistry. Now, that internship would serve a very different purpose. Harper's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. The words appeared on her screen like a digital slap. "You think you scared us tonight? This is just the beginning. We know where you live." The message was followed by a photo of Harper's apartment building, taken from the parking lot just minutes ago. Someone had followed her home. Harper's blood ran cold as she realized the confrontation in the school parking lot hadn't ended Madison's campaign. It had escalated it. The threat of explosive compounds had temporarily established Harper's credibility, but it had also painted a target on her back that would be impossible to remove. She walked to her bedroom window and peered through the blinds. A black luxury sedan sat in the visitor parking area, its engine running and headlights off. The silhouette behind the steering wheel was feminine, patient, watching. Madison Sterling was conducting surveillance on Harper's home, gathering intelligence for the next phase of her psychological warfare. The privileged princess, who had never faced real consequences for her actions, was preparing to invade the one space where Harper had felt safe. Harper's phone buzzed again. Another message. Poor little scholarship girl in her poor little apartment. Does your mommy know what kind of terrorist she raised? The word terrorist hit like a physical blow. Madison was already spinning tonight's confrontation into a narrative that would justify whatever retaliation she was planning. Harper's defensive use of chemistry knowledge would be twisted into evidence of dangerous instability, uncontrolled aggression, potential violence. The third message contained a video file. Harper's hands trembled as she opened it. Recognizing the school parking lot, immediately, the footage showed her holding the vial of nitroglycerin, her voice carrying clearly as she described its explosive properties, but the video had been edited, removing the context of Madison's harassment and making Harper appear to be the unprovoked aggressor. This goes viral tomorrow unless you transfer schools. The final message read, Your choice? Harper stared at her reflection in the darkened window. Seeing a girl who had been backed into a corner with no remaining options for peaceful resolution, Madison Sterling had escalated their conflict beyond the point where compromise was possible. She had brought the battle to Harper's home, threatened her mother's safety, and prepared evidence that could destroy Harper's future regardless of its accuracy. The scholarship student who had only wanted to study chemistry in peace was gone, replaced by someone who understood that survival sometimes required fighting fire with fire. Or in this case, fighting privilege with knowledge and controlled explosions. Harper returned to her laptop and opened a new document, beginning to outline plans that would make her earlier nitroglycerin demonstration look like a gentle warning. Madison Sterling wanted to play psychological warfare with someone who understood chemical warfare. She was about to discover the difference between inherited power and earned expertise. The winter break had just become much more dangerous for everyone involved. 2 weeks into winter break, Harper had transformed her mother's kitchen into a command center that would have impressed military strategists. Chemical formulas covered every available surface, meticulously calculated ratios for compounds that existed in the gray area between educational experiments and something far more dangerous. The black sedan had appeared outside her apartment building every night for a week before disappearing entirely. Madison Sterling thought she was playing a waiting game, building psychological pressure while Harper cowered in fear. She had no idea that her target was using the time to plan something that would end their conflict permanently. Harper's mother noticed the change immediately when she returned from her shift at 3 in the morning to find her daughter still awake, surrounded by chemistry textbooks and pages of handwritten calculations. "Honey, it's winter break," Sarah Blackwood said gently. Setting down her purse and hospital badge, "You should be relaxing, not studying, just working on some extra credit projects," Harper replied, carefully sliding a particularly volatile formula under her organic chemistry textbook. "Want to stay ahead for next semester?" Sarah's tired eyes reflected months of worry about her daughter's increasingly withdrawn behavior. The scholarship to Willowbrook High had been a dream come true, but it had also placed Harper in a social environment where she would never truly belong. The late nights, the destroyed textbooks, the mysterious bruises Harper claimed came from clumsiness. Everything pointed to problems her mother felt powerless to solve. "Are you sure everything's okay at school?" Sarah asked, settling into the chair across from her daughter. "You seem different lately." "More intense." Harper looked up from her calculations, seeing the exhaustion etched into her mother's face. Sarah worked 60-hour weeks to pay for Harper's education, sacrificing her own health and happiness so her daughter could have opportunities she'd never experienced. The idea that Madison Sterling's cruelty might destroy those sacrifices made Harper's blood boil with controlled fury. "Everything's fine, Mom," Harper lied smoothly. "Just excited about some new chemistry concepts I've been exploring." The truth was far more complex. Harper had spent 2 weeks researching not just explosive compounds, but the Sterling family's business practices, daily routines, and security vulnerabilities. Madison's father had built Sterling Industries through a combination of government contracts and environmental shortcuts that had poisoned groundwater in 3 neighboring communities. The family's wealth was built on chemical processes that prioritized profit over public safety. Harper's revenge would highlight that hypocrisy in ways Madison could never escape. January 3rd marked the return to Willowbrook High, and Harper arrived at school carrying more than textbooks in her backpack. Hidden compartments contained carefully prepared compounds, each designed for maximum psychological impact with minimal actual danger. She had learned from months of Madison's torment that the threat of destruction could be more powerful than destruction itself. Madison was waiting by Harper's locker, flanked by her usual crew of followers. But something had changed during the break. Savannah looked nervous, constantly checking her phone. Sierra avoided eye contact entirely. Brooklyn hung back from the group, no longer eager to participate in whatever harassment Madison had planned. "Did you miss me?" Madison asked with manufactured sweetness as Harper approached her locker. "I hope you used your vacation time to think about our conversation." "Actually, I did," Harper replied calmly, entering her combination with steady hands. "I spent a lot of time in the chemistry lab, made some fascinating discoveries." Madison's confidence faltered slightly. The edited video she'd planned to release had somehow been corrupted during the break, the file mysteriously becoming unreadable despite multiple backup copies. Her family's IT specialist had been unable to recover the footage, claiming the damage looked like the result of sophisticated cyber warfare. "You know what I realized?" Harper continued, opening her locker and revealing a small collection of glass vials arranged like a chemist's toolkit. "Chemical reactions are a lot like social dynamics. Apply the right pressure to the right elements, and you can create explosions that reshape entire environments." Savannah took a step backward, recognizing the distinctive smell of sulfur compounds emanating from Harper's locker. Her father was a chemical engineer, and she'd grown up around industrial facilities. She knew dangerous materials when she encountered them. "What is that smell?" Sierra asked, wrinkling her nose. "Innovation," Harper said simply. "See, I've been working on a project that combines my academic interests with practical applications. Want to see a demonstration?" Before anyone could respond, Harper removed a small beaker containing clear liquid and a second vial filled with white powder. "This is a classic example of acid-base neutralization," she explained, in the same tone she might use during a class presentation. "Completely harmless when the components remain separate. But when they combine," she allowed a single drop of liquid to fall into the powder. The reaction was immediate and violent, producing a flash of bright light and a sharp cracking sound that echoed through the hallway. Students turned to stare, some pulling out phones to record what looked like an impromptu science demonstration. "The beautiful thing about chemistry," Harper continued conversationally, "is that it's completely predictable. Unlike social situations, chemical reactions follow precise laws. If you know the inputs, you can control the outputs." Madison's face had gone pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. "You're insane! Someone needs to call security." "For a chemistry demonstration?" Harper asked innocently. "That would be unfortunate, especially since I have so many more experiments planned. Did you know that your family's chemical plant contains enough raw materials to supply a university-level advanced chemistry program for an entire semester?" The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Harper wasn't just talking about classroom demonstrations anymore. She was discussing industrial-scale chemical reactions using materials from Sterling Industries itself. Brooklyn finally found her voice. "Madison, maybe we should just leave her alone." "No," Madison snapped. But her usual authority was cracking. "She doesn't get to threaten me. My father owns half this town, and my chemistry knowledge could reduce the other half to a smoking crater." Harper replied pleasantly. "But I'm not interested in destruction. I'm interested in education." She pulled out her phone and began scrolling through a series of photographs. "For example, I've been researching your family's business practices. Did you know Sterling Industries has been illegally dumping chemical waste in Clearwater Creek for the past 5 years?" Madison's face went from pale to green. "That's not true," EPA violation reports, soil contamination studies, groundwater analysis. Harper continued, showing images of official documents, everything properly documented and ready for distribution to environmental protection agencies, local news stations, and social media platforms. The gathered crowd of students had grown larger, drawn by the combination of chemical demonstrations and what sounded like a major scandal unfolding. Several were actively recording the conversation, creating exactly the kind of viral content Madison had once threatened to produce about Harper. You see, Harper explained to her audience, bullies like Madison rely on their victims staying silent. They count on people being too scared or too powerless to fight back. But knowledge is the ultimate equalizer. Savannah grabbed Madison's arm. We need to go. Now, but here's the really interesting part, Harper continued. Ignoring the interruption, Madison's family doesn't just pollute the environment. They've been using their political connections to suppress environmental regulations while publicly claiming to support clean industry initiatives. More photographs appeared on Harper's phone screen, showing what appeared to be private communications between Sterling Industries executives and local politicians. The documents detailed a systematic campaign to weaken environmental protections while maintaining a public facade of corporate responsibility. How did you get those? Madison demanded, her voice cracking with panic. Chemistry isn't just about mixing compounds, Harper explained. It's about understanding systems, identifying weaknesses, and applying precise pressure to create desired reactions. Your family's computer security had some interesting vulnerabilities. The crowd around them had grown to include several teachers. Drawn by the commotion and the increasingly dramatic revelations, Mr. Peterson, Harper's chemistry teacher, pushed through the group of students with obvious concern. What's going on here? He demanded. Taking in the chemical equipment scattered around Harper's locker, just a practical demonstration of applied chemistry. Mr. Peterson, Harper said respectfully, I've been working on some independent research projects over the break. Those compounds look potentially dangerous. Mr. Peterson observed, his trained eye recognizing serious chemical materials only if misused. Harper assured him, but they're perfectly safe when handled by someone with proper training and education. Unlike some industrial facilities that prioritize profit over safety protocols, Mr. Peterson's expression grew thoughtful as he processed Harper's words and the scattered documents visible on her phone. As a chemistry teacher, he was well aware of Sterling Industries' environmental record and had often wondered how they avoided regulatory oversight. Perhaps we should continue this conversation in the chemistry lab, he suggested. I'd be very interested to see your research methodology. Madison realized with growing horror that Harper had orchestrated the entire confrontation to take place in front of witnesses who could verify and amplify her revelations. The chemical demonstrations weren't threats, they were advertisements for Harper's capabilities. The environmental documents weren't blackmail, they were evidence that would inevitably reach authorities regardless of Madison's response. This isn't over, Madison hissed, but the words lacked conviction. Actually, it is, Harper replied calmly. Because you made the mistake of bullying someone who understands that the most powerful reactions happen when you combine knowledge with justice. As Madison and her remaining followers retreated down the hallway, Harper began carefully packing her chemical equipment back into her locker. The crowd gradually dispersed, but not before dozens of students had recorded enough footage to ensure the story would spread throughout the school within hours. Mr. Peterson remained behind, studying Harper with newfound respect and concern. Those environmental documents, he said quietly, are they authentic? Every page, Harper confirmed. Sterling Industries has been violating federal environmental regulations for years. The evidence is overwhelming and completely verifiable. And you discovered this? How? Harper's smile was enigmatic. Chemistry teaches you to look for patterns. Mr. Peterson, once you understand how systems work, finding their weaknesses becomes a matter of systematic analysis. Within 24 hours, Harper's environmental evidence had been transmitted to every relevant regulatory agency in the state, The EPA announced a comprehensive investigation into Sterling Industries' waste disposal practices. Local news stations picked up the story, featuring interviews with community members whose wells had been contaminated by illegal chemical dumping. Madison Sterling's family found themselves at the center of a federal environmental investigation that would ultimately result in millions of dollars in fines and mandatory cleanup operations. The political connections that had once protected them became liabilities as elected officials scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal. But Harper's most satisfying victory came during AP chemistry class the following week. Madison had been absent for 3 days, presumably dealing with lawyers and crisis management consultants. When she finally returned, she looked like someone who had aged years in a matter of days. "Miss Sterling." "Mr. Peterson," announced as Madison took her seat. "I have some good news. Miss Blackwood's independent research has been so impressive that I'm recommending her for the state science fair competition. Her work on environmental chemistry analysis shows exceptional promise." Harper felt a warm glow of satisfaction as she saw Madison's expression crumble. The girl who had spent months questioning Harper's academic abilities was now forced to watch her receive the kind of recognition Madison had always taken for granted. After class, Harper found a note in her locker written on expensive stationery. "You win. I'm transferring to private school. Please don't destroy my family." Harper crumpled the note and dropped it in the nearest trash can. She hadn't set out to destroy anyone's family. She had simply refused to be destroyed herself, using knowledge and strategic thinking to protect not just her own future, but the environmental health of her entire community. 3 months later, Harper received early admission to Stanford University with a full scholarship specifically designated for students pursuing environmental chemistry. Her application essay about using scientific knowledge to promote social justice had impressed admissions committees at 7 different universities. Madison Sterling's name appeared in the local newspaper one final time, announcing her enrollment at an expensive boarding school in another state. Her family's chemical plant operated under strict environmental monitoring, and the Clearwater Creek Cleanup Project had become a model for community-driven environmental protection. On graduation day, Harper walked across the stage to receive her diploma and the school's highest honor for academic achievement. In the audience, her mother cried tears of pride and exhaustion, finally understanding that all her sacrifices had been worthwhile. The quiet chemistry student who had once been forced toward a puddle of mud had become something far more powerful than her tormentors could have imagined. A young scientist armed with knowledge, integrity, and the absolute refusal to let bullies define her worth. As Harper accepted her diploma, she thought about the girl she had been just months earlier, scared, isolated, and convinced that silence was her only option for survival. That girl was gone, replaced by someone who understood that the most explosive reactions happened when you combined education with courage and refused to let anyone convince you that you didn't belong exactly where you were. The real chemistry had never been about the compounds in her locker. It had been about the transformation of fear into power, silence into action, and victimhood into victory through the precise application of knowledge and unwavering determination. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room was the one everyone had dismissed as powerless. Harper Blackwood had proven that intelligence, properly applied, could be more devastating than any explosive and far more constructive in building the future she deserved. Harper's victory over Madison Sterling created ripple effects throughout Willowbrook High that extended far beyond their personal conflict. Within weeks of the environmental scandal breaking, the school administration implemented new policies designed to prevent harassment and protect students from intimidation tactics that had once been dismissed as typical teenage drama. Principal Morrison called a special assembly to address what he carefully termed recent events that highlighted the need for stronger anti-bullying measures. Harper sat in the back of the auditorium, watching Madison's empty seat in the front row where student council officers traditionally sat during official presentations. Academic excellence, Principal Morrison announced to the packed auditorium, should never be questioned or undermined because of a student's socio-economic background. Intelligence and dedication are not privileges reserved for the wealthy. The words felt like vindication for every scholarship student who had ever been made to feel inferior simply because their families couldn't afford luxury cars and designer clothes. Harper noticed several students sitting straighter in their seats, particularly those she recognized as fellow scholarship recipients who had suffered similar harassment in silence. After the assembly, something unexpected happened. Students began approaching Harper with their own stories of bullying and intimidation. Autumn Rodriguez, a sophomore whose family had immigrated from Mexico, described how Madison's followers had questioned her English proficiency despite her perfect grades. River Chen, a junior whose parents owned a small restaurant, shared how he'd been mocked for his cheap clothes and excluded from study groups despite his exceptional math skills. "You showed us that we don't have to take it," Autumn said during lunch. Sitting at Harper's previously isolated table, that being smart is actually more powerful than being rich. Harper found herself in the unfamiliar position of being sought out rather than avoided. Students who had once feared associating with Madison's target now viewed Harper as someone who had proven that knowledge could triumph over privilege when properly applied. The transformation wasn't limited to social dynamics. Mr. Peterson approached Harper after chemistry class with an unprecedented opportunity. The State University Research Program is looking for exceptional high school students to participate in advanced environmental chemistry projects, he explained, handing her an application packet. "Your work exposing Sterling Industries violations has caught their attention. They're offering a paid summer internship with full university lab access." Harper stared at the application, recognizing names of professors whose research papers she had studied obsessively during her late-night sessions in the school lab. The internship would provide access to equipment and resources beyond anything she had imagined possible. "There's one condition, Mr. Peterson added with a slight smile. "They want you to continue your environmental advocacy work. Apparently, they believe chemistry students should learn to use their knowledge for community benefit, not just academic advancement." The irony wasn't lost on Harper. Madison's harassment campaign, designed to destroy her academic future, had instead launched her toward opportunities that Madison's family connections could never have provided. Merit had proven more valuable than money in the academic world. Harper was entering 2 weeks before graduation. Harper received an unexpected visitor at her apartment. Sarah Blackwood answered the door to find a well-dressed woman in her 50s. Carrying expensive leather briefcase and wearing the kind of confident expression that came from corporate boardrooms, the scholarship student who had once been pushed toward a puddle of mud was now heading to Stanford University with research opportunities that would define her career in environmental chemistry. More importantly, she had learned that intelligence combined with courage could reshape systems that seemed unchangeable. As Harper packed for college, she kept one item from her confrontation with Madison Sterling, the small vial that had contained her nitroglycerin demonstration, empty now. It served as a reminder that sometimes the most powerful explosions happened not in chemistry labs, but in the moments when someone refused to accept that knowledge should bow to privilege. The quiet girl who had discovered her voice would never be silent again.